I arrived in Lubbock a few years back, and despite my very expensive education and years of experience, I took a job, a low-wage job, at one of the big box hardware stores here in town. And as part of my duties, some mornings I would have to open up at 6 a.m. or be there prior to 6 a.m. And so I rode my bike those mornings. And Lubbock, I love you, but it's cold outside, okay? And so to make this routine a little more bearable, what I did was I would stop at a fast food restaurant, park my bike, go in and get a breakfast combo, and then head on to work. But one particular morning, I parked my bike, and I noticed there was a young man sitting along the wall. And he asked me for spare change. So I said, okay, if you watch my bike, I'll give you $1 when I come back out. And so as I put my bike down, I walked inside. A man came outside. He blew right past me, bumped me, didn't say excuse me, looked at me as if I had done something wrong. He then looked at the young man who was along the wall and said, I changed my mind. I was going to give you money, but you're probably just going to use it to buy drugs. Here. So he reached in his bag and he took a breakfast sandwich and he threw it at the young man. The sandwich came fast, and of course the young man wasn't ready, so it hit him in the chest and it hit the ground, and all three pieces spilled out onto the sidewalk. I was furious. So the man and I exchanged words, and he, of course, got in his pickup truck with a little silver fish on the back and drove away. This became the catalyst for me to start my own nonprofit organization. What I did was I found the 3 most vulnerable groups in Lubbock, and before I knew it, I was teaching financial literacy to soon-to-be-released offenders. I was also teaching job readiness skills to the chronically unemployed, and I was also teaching life skills to children who are about to be emancipated into adulthood. Everything was going great, but then I started to notice that I was seeing the same people over and over again, and I became disheartened. I became even discouraged. So I went back to my wife and a few friends, and they told me to revisit what ignited this passion to begin with. And I went back to the restaurant and the breakfast sandwich, and it broke my heart to realize that I, too, was out there throwing breakfast sandwiches at the poor. I was doing this in 3 ways. First of which, I had arrogantly and naively went to address poverty without understanding what poverty really was. There are some people who believe that poverty can be magically cured with just money, a swift kick in the pants, or separating the poor from substance abuse. I had believed that I could change and affect poverty just by changing the mindset of the people who live in poverty. We were all wrong. I did some research and I realized that poverty relies basically on 20 different factors, both internal and external, and the prevalence of poverty and its existence answers 2 fundamental questions. How much do you have? And ultimately, what is the likelihood of you keeping it? And in this way, I went back and I addressed things. Because the second way I was like the young man who threw the sandwich is that I did not take the time to fully understand poverty, but I didn't take the time to understand their poverty. After the young man in the pickup truck drove off, I went back and I spoke to the young man who was along the wall. He was crying, he had tears running down his face, and he wasn't quite picking up the sandwich, and I offered him to buy him another sandwich. But he said, I'm hungry, but I don't really need the sandwich. I need spare change. It turns out that he had been kicked out of his apartment, and his mom had bought him a bus ticket to go back home to Houston, and all he needed was spare change to get on the bus to go to the bus station. It turns out the spare change that I gave him was cheaper than the breakfast sandwich. By taking time to understand his situation, his poverty, I did not waste valuable resources. I went back to those classes that I was disheartened from. I asked them what they wanted from me. It turns out that the soon-to-be-released offenders did not want financial literacy. What they wanted to do is learn how to earn adequate incomes as ex-offenders. It turns out that the chronically unemployed did not have problems with their resumes, attire, or interview skills. They want to know how to keep a job for longer than 90 days. Turns out that the soon-to-be-released emancipated children into adulthood want to know how to make their money last longer because they'd never been taught to shop or to buy groceries. And I started teaching those things, and my results became much more profound. And so when I go around town now, I see people who thank me because I filled in a gap between where they were and where they wanted to go. Which brings me to my third point. I was much like the man who threw the sandwich in this way. I shared his attitude. My attitude when I did things for the poor was much like his. It was take it or leave it. This is a wrong attitude because often if something can be left, it is of very little value. What if instead of throwing breakfast sandwiches at the poor, we took the time to carefully place it in their hands as if it is of some value to us as well? Maybe by showing that we value what we give, we show that we value who we're giving it to. There's a difference between an attitude of take it or leave it and an attitude that entrusts someone that is of value, at least to us. This is why many of the efforts that we have to help poverty is much like throwing breakfast sandwiches at the poor. We throw it at them with this attitude of take it or leave it, and if it hits the ground and becomes wasted, we don't care. We simply drive off and continue on with our lives. Therein lies the reason why many of us think the poor are ungrateful. That's why we think that efforts to resolve poverty are ineffective. Maybe if we gave things that are value to us as well, our efforts would be more effective. We tend to educate the poor, but not well enough for them to attend and to maintain attendance at our most elite universities. Here's a breakfast sandwich, take it or leave it. We employ the poor, but not well enough for them to make a living. Here's a breakfast sandwich, take it or leave it. We bring our animals inside when it gets cold, but we leave them in shelters, tents, houses, boxes. Here's a breakfast sandwich, take it or leave it. It's not good enough for us, but it's good enough for you. A warm coat rarely goes unworn. A freshly prepared meal rarely goes uneaten. And a well-taught lesson rarely is forgotten. Stop throwing breakfast sandwiches at the poor. Do, give, teach, but do so with love and in love with humanity. Happy birthday, Joshua. Happy birthday, Josiah. Thank you.